About Hellsing Ultimate. I forgot for what video, but I mentioned I was picking up Hellsing, and pretty much straight after finishing the video I started watching it. For some reason I thought it was Hellsing Ultimate for a long ass time. I don't know if I misheard it the first time I heard about it, but for the whole time I knew about it, before I actually watched it, I thought it was Hellsing. Hellsing makes more sense because of the story, but Hellsing sounds a lot cooler to me, to be honest. It rolls off the tongue a lot better, you know? Hellsing was another one of those animes I wanted to watch for a fat minute, but I kept dodging it, cause other shows I wanted to watch kept coming up. But the spring anime season is pretty dry overall. It's given me a good chance to knock down a few animes I never got to, and Hellsing was one of them. I had no clue what I was really getting into. I just knew people said it was good. All I knew was that it was about vampires and shit. People don't mention it that often, but when they do, it's always about how good it is. So I went in with pretty good expectations for it, and the first episode met me pretty well for what my expectations were for it. We had Alucard pull up to a village in his drip, but then he got gunned down immediately. But then he comes back to life, kills the ghouls and the vampire, then he saves Sarah. Sarah doesn't look like much at the start, but she goes pretty important later on in the anime. The time periods and shit are another thing I want to bring up later. That shit was really confusing. I could tell straight away that this was gonna be a gory ass anime, like really fucking gory. I don't mind it, but sometimes it looked like they were just adding gore for the hell of it. Pun intended, you know, cause Hellsing Ultimate, hell. The joke is I said hell and that's in the name. It looked like it was being set in medieval Europe by the shit that was going on at the start, with them being in a village and all that. To be honest, I don't know why I thought this, cause looking back at it now, Sarah was using a big ass industrialized gun in the first episode, and even before that she had a pretty modern looking cop outfit before she turned into a vampire. Even though I can't really say what time it's set in, I think it's like early 2000s at the latest, or 1980s at the earliest. It ended up expanding into something way bigger than what I was expecting from first impressions. Skip to like the second half of the first episode, and we meet Anderson, single-handedly the coolest character in the show. Most people would probably say Alucard with him being a vampire and shit, but Anderson is cooler in almost every way. He has just as much drip as Alucard, but he also has that crazy church mentality to him. Anderson is like that one priest in Berserk, but not a dick. With the first introduction to Alucard, he was already set up to be one of the strongest characters in the anime. I can really tell before finishing the first episode, he wasn't gonna go through any training arc or anything like that. Alucard was more of a teacher if anything. He was giving Sarah hints about vampire abilities. He already completed his own story before Hellsing. He was just starring in it as a guest appearance. From the jump, Alucard was set up to be this untouchable vampire, so having this crazy Catholic guy hold his own against him was pretty cool to see. It wasn't even him holding his own. He was overwhelming the both of them, to be honest. It was a good way to show preparation can go a long way. I mean, Alucard didn't take off his limiters or anything like that in the fight since it ended early, but I didn't know that at that point. They're shown to be on the same level. All the entrances in Hellsing are cold as fuck. Every time they manage to one-up themselves. Alucard's entrance when he came back from being overseas was one of the best entrances I've seen in any anime. Like Madara when he first got introduced, or Aizen being revealed as a traitor, that kind of entrance. After that, just goes straight into the next thing. The pacing in Hellsing is pretty quick, but in a good way. It just throws you into the next fight and that expands the world more and more. And with how good the animation is, it's just back to back good choreo. The animation is good, that's all you need to know. This animation is really good for how old it is. At first, before I watched it, I thought it came out in like early 2010s. It's still like a decade old, but there's still animes from that time that have good animation, around the level that Hellsing is at, so I assumed that it was also around that time. It came out in 2006 though, a year after I was born. There's not that many animes around that time you could say have good animation that holds up today. Also, for anyone who might be confused, I'm talking about Ultimate, not the original. I'm just saying Hellsing because it's easier to say, but I'm talking about Ultimate. People say the original is also good, but Ultimate is just better in every way. And with the animation pump that it got, that alone sells it a lot more for me. I don't mind bad animation, but that's a pretty big part of the experience. The original went down its own path, because it was being made at the same time the manga was. Guess it's not really a faithful adaptation, but it still has its own benefits. By the first episode, we already established the antagonist and protagonist of the story. We have Hellsing, with Alucard, Sarah, and Integra as a protagonist. And for the antagonist, we have Anderson and the church. Makes enough sense since they kind of go against each other. With the antagonist and protagonist established for the story, we move on to the next phase. Yo, am I tripping or is that Bling Bling Boy? I'm not tripping, right? I can't be the only one who thought that this guy was Bling Bling Boy on sight. My nigga got reincarnated into a dark fantasy after the Johnny Test Bow song. he was revealed to be the head of an underground third party that was slowly starting to be more relevant. The leader for the church boys dropped some info, and apparently this third faction was a certain German organization. Not only did they have Bling Bling Boy as the head of the third faction, this nigga was also a Nazi. For some reason I was more surprised about Bling Bling Boy being in an anime than him being a Nazi. That shit was pretty random, but it ended up turning into a three-way war in London. For the Nazis it had Lean Girl Cat Nigga Dog Nigga. For the church it was mostly Anderson and his boys. Then for Hellsing was Alucard, Sarah, and Integra. This really expanded way past what I was imagining it would turn out to be. I'd be surprised if they managed to add some other ridiculous shit.
And you are?
Judd Forrest from the South Carolina Baptist Confederate Congregation. I got me here some 300 and change good old boys from the Knights of the Hanging Noose.
This shit is starting to feel like one of those Cartoon Network crossover episodes. They just kept adding more niggas into the fight, cause why not? Even though on paper it didn't really sound realistic, the number gap between all three groups was really fucking big. But it still felt like a war. There was lots of bloodshed and fighting, but it wasn't all mindless. Even the fights that felt like they had no purpose, they were all building up to something bigger. At this point Hellsing added Bernadette to their group, and that guy probably had the coolest moments ever in the anime. His and Sarah's moment is definitely top 2 for me, only second to the finale, and that's not really too surprising cause it's the finale. At first I didn't really like or dislike him, he was just there for the ride to be honest. He got added kind of last minute with his mercenary group, to help Hellsing in the war. Bernadette's group was basically the Band of the Hawk in Hellsing, but not as relevant, just like the original Band of the Hawk once it got supernatural. I saw a lot of shit I could tie back to Berserk from Hellsing, like Bling Bling Boy. A lot of shit is inspired by Berserk, and it's also a dark fantasy, so it probably took one or two things from it. Bernadette did most of the back end stuff, since they had vampires to do most of the work. He was the backbone for the Hellsing group for the time Alucard was overseas, and ended up developing Sarah's character. Bernadette felt real with his personality, when everyone else around him was just fucking crazy. He grew up in a mercenary family, and when he was a kid he hated it cause he got bullied for it. And when he told his grandfather about it, he basically said what those kids said were true, and that they were shitty people for being in the business. I feel like most animes would have him grow up to be the opposite of a mercenary, like a pacifist or something, but he grew to accept it and have it be part of him. I mean, he still didn't act like it was a good thing or anything. He acknowledges that it's a pretty bad business to be in, but still chose to stick with it. Bernadette was a pretty respectable guy from start to finish. The only ugly spot of the anime, which is mostly just my personal taste, the humor is dry as fuck. They try to cut down the seriousness of the anime with these small skits, but they don't do anything. Sarah's main purpose of the story was to be the one who did the skits, and that's why I thought she was mid for like half the series. But after she had her moment with Bernadette, she turned into a badass. I thought she was gonna be the Sakura of the anime, but she turned out to be pretty important and relevant. I just went on my phone or anything to avoid the skits. They didn't add anything at all. It's not that big of an issue, but I think most people would notice it. That and the fact that the episodes are long. I thought I could finish it at the end of the day, cause it was only 10 episodes, but each episode can go from 40 minutes to 1 hour. It's basically a 24 episode anime compressed into 10 episodes. That's not really a big deal, but I got misled when I started it. That sums up all I have to say though pretty much. 10 out of 10 show, go watch it. If you enjoyed, watch some of my other videos about anime shit. That's all I have to say though. Peace.